Greetings everyone, my name is Etterville, and welcome back to my Let's Play of A Valley Without Wind. In the last part, I explored an underground cave system, collected some spell gems on the normal missions as well as secret missions, and in the process, I got a Summoned Wind Shelter Guardian Power Scroll. So now, let's reclaim part of this world from those windy storms. Now, in order to place these wind shelters, you must do these on the border of the stormy and non-stormy parts of the world. If you place it on a non-stormy part of the world, it will temporarily become stormy. Now, what makes the stormy parts of the map so dangerous is that it has two effects. One, it makes the enemies stronger. Two, it constantly damages your character for a set amount of health. It will not kill off your character eventually, but it will reduce your health to a minimum of 1, which means basically practically any attack afterwards will kill your character. It also slowly blows your character in the direction of the wind, and it becomes even more dangerous near the lieutenant bases, or the evil Overlord himself or herself. So, I strongly urge you to avoid going to these locations, unless you know what you're doing, have epic spell gems, or are willing to risk fighting through all these dangerous enemies. Or if you're going to this scenario and trying to summon a wind shelter. Now in the Summon Wind Shelter missions, you go to a stormy part of the map, but in this case, you must travel from one part of the map to another, and reach the wind shelter. There's a lot more mini-bosses than usual, so I suggest you try using your Storm Dash and avoiding most of them as possible. But when you reach the other end, you'll reach the unbuilt windmill, press E, and it'll be built. And with that, now part of the world has been cleared. The grasslands to the north are now open to us, so now let's go take on the level 2 lieutenant. Now, the thing is though, whenever you visit a lieutenant, the land surrounding them, or the land the lieutenant's in, will have a higher level than what your character is. So in this case, my character right now has a level of 1, whereas the enemies here have a level of 2. Plus, of course, there are all sorts of new enemies that we haven't seen before, as we've now moved on to the Ice Age section, and moved on from the Ice Age section to a Grassland section. I did place a farm in a grassland, but we've never really seen all these types of enemies. Like those more dangerous ice throwers, those rhinos of sorts. Oh, these are so annoying initially if you don't have their weakness. Especially considering that in most cases they're resistant towards the Ivy Whip, as they're Earth Elemental. Or these are called shads, I believe, if I recall correctly. But really, yeah, they're really annoying. But they're the least of your worries, as we'll discover later. Preferably, it's best to use air elemental or fire elemental attacks. But I haven't gotten the other whip attacks yet, so I'm mainly going to be using this. Especially because Earth right now is raw damage potential, and I have enough mana to support it. But yeah, this map is basically like any other map or square of the world, but in this case my objective is to reach the point where the evil lieutenant's tower is. So I'd rather ignore all of the houses and just go on from him. And by killing enough of those enemies, I've unlocked unlockable, but I've also toughened up the enemies as well. When taking on these shads as well, I suggest using arcing attacks like here, so you can lure them away. Before I decided to go on to the Evil Lieutenant's tower, I decided to go after the boss tower right next to him in this secret mission.
Whenever you have the chance, try doing a secret mission as quickly as possible, as they have better rewards than the normal missions found in the overworld map. But in addition to that, they have more unlockables, and they give more parts of the story, which is given non-chronologically usually, but still pretty interesting. They are sometimes tougher though, so please be cautious while doing so. But really though, this is really like the classic boss tower from before. It's just that with some tougher new enemy types. But if you get used to this, it's not too bad. If you complete enough of these bosses tower missions, you'll unlock a new mission type, but we're a bit ways off from there. With that, we've now completed the boss tower, and now it's time to move on back to our original objective. That is, it's time to scale the Evil Lieutenant's tower. Or rather, the Evil Outpost. Now the reason why I call it the Evil Lieutenant's tower is because this is a lot like the boss tower missions. Though, unlike having a dozen or so rooms, having to climb up one by one, here we have only 3 rooms. The initial starting room, an intermediary room, and then the boss room. What makes this a little bit like a boss tower is that the basic room, the one shown at the bottom, is basically a combination of all those original rooms in the boss tower missions. So we have a long trek up in just one room type.
and we'll be seeing a repetition of this for all the other Evil Lieutenant outposts. Thankfully though, it's not too annoying on lower difficulties, but with all these bat-type enemies, espers, and whatnot, it can be quite dangerous on higher level difficulties. If you have the polymorph bat spell, or whatever it's called, you'll be able to, in your bat form, fly up and avoid most of these enemies and make this a very easy transition up. But yeah, it's basically a boss tower with most of the rooms in the boss tower fused into one. Also, the nice speedrunning tactic you can use with the whip type spells is that you can propel yourself upwards or in a certain direction, which is more useful in higher level difficulties when there is less platforms given in the background. For this first outpost, I'll definitely be just doing the easy route. Or, not really the easy route, but the intended route. And in the next ones, I'll most likely be using the polymorph bat spell to skip most of this. And as always, make sure to bring a lot of wooden platforms for these Evil Outposts. You'll need them. As well as some wooden crates for these acid waters. Later on, when you get the triple jump and quadruple jump abilities, it really makes traversing these areas much simpler. But with that, time to do a stat check, and then we'll be facing off after the Evil Overlords. Evil Overlord Lieutenant's room, to be precise. And apparently our first Evil Overlord's Lieutenant is a Skellybot. Skellybot Giant. Unfortunately, I don't really have his weakness. So, I decided to just use my Ivy Whip to whip him to death, basically. But with that, with the first Evil Lieutenant down, now the world level has been risen by 1, meaning that my character's level has been increased, so his statistics have also been increased. And with that, though, that means that enemies' levels have all increased by 1. However, my spell gems haven't increased in level, so I really need to replace most of them. Now, once I defeat enough Evil Lieutenants, about 3 as the tooltip said, the enemies will start to migrate out of their respective habitats. So, when grassland enemies will start to migrate over to the neighboring territories. Like these chads will move on to the icelands. So be cautious when you have certain hated enemy types, as we'll see later on when I reach the ocean. It's time to warp out of here and get back to home base. Now the next Evil Lieutenant nearby, unfortunately it's covered by windstorms, so I have one of 2 options. Either search through the missions for a deploy wind shelter, or just trudge to the wind and go face him off, but I doubt it with this low level. But before doing either of those, I need to upgrade my spell gems up to level 2. Or level 3 specifically, as spell gem levels are always 1 level higher than your current character's level. Now, there are certain tricks you can do in order for your spell gems to level up with you,
but those I have to be using uncommon orbs, epic orbs, etc. But they're really hard to come by. They randomly generate in the world, or you can get them more favorably by defeating evil overlords, or the lieutenants, but the best ones are from the evil overlords. So make sure to conserve them. And as always, make sure to check your enchants and shuffle them off, as my boots had a nice upgrade. My original ones had the same effect as my new ones, but they have a better defensive stat. So, off the old ones go. Unfortunately, none of these spells are of use to me now. The Ball of Light and the Ball of Light will be very helpful for the ocean and very other dark areas when I have to replace my chest gear. Notch Rock is a little bit too much of a projectile drop, so... And Healing Touch is really more of a use for multiplayer. Or if I want to spare some extra health drops. And Light Snake will be useful in the ocean as well, but I kind of prefer my attacks, so it really depends. But off I go, scouting out for more missions again. My first priority is upgrading my Leafy Whip, of course. So off to another gauntlet of a boss tower. And of course, I'll spare you the trouble and skip most of this. And when I mean skip, I mean more like fast forward through all of this. With that, I've now upgraded my Leafy Whip 2 to Leafy Whip 3 with better stats, and now with a spell modifier. So finally, let's check our stats with the new upgrades, and it looks like we're in pretty good shape for the next set of missions. And in the next part, I'll be exploring more of the world, and hopefully taking on another lieutenant. Thanks for watching, viewers, and have a nice day! Doodles!